Hi, my name's Doug Farrand. I'm currently serving as the president of Faith+Works, Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Orange. So I'm going to open this up today, welcome you all to the space, explain about our congregation and the HUUB, how they're connected, and then we'll have some opening words like the chalice, and then introduce our esteemed guests for the day. So it's 2025, which blows my mind every time I think about it, which happens to be 135 years since this Unitarian Universalist congregation was founded, and 10 years since the congregation pivoted and created the HUUB, which I'll talk about in a second. But first I wanted to read a little entry from the History of the Oranges, Volume 3. Unitarian. The first service of worship under Unitarian auspices was held in the Masonic Temple in Orange, which used to be down on Main Street, but sadly burned down in a under suspicious circumstances last year. On Sunday, January 12, 1890, Reverend John White Chadwick of Brooklyn, poet and successor of Reverend Samuel Longfellow, brother of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, also a Unitarian, preached the sermon. The service was soon followed by incorporation, the first trustees being Henry Foster Hitch, President, W.C. Swift, Treasurer, and Warren Delano Jr., Nathan L. Handy, Mrs. Margaret L. Aborn, Clemens Herschel, and Isabel Firm. Reverend Edward Hale, the first minister, was installed on April 2nd, 1891. Among the noted preachers who served the new church before the installation of Mr. Hale were Reverend Edward Everett Hale, Francis G. Peabody, Price Collier, Robert Collier, and Robert Collier. The cornerstone was laid December 22nd, 1892, and the new church dedicated in May 1893. The church has held a steady and prosperous group from the first Reverend Edward Hale, resigned in July 1897, to accept a professorship at Harvard University. For a year and a half, the church was without a settled minister. In November 1898, the present pastor, Reverend Walter Reed Hutt, was called and is continuing the work to this day. The church has had but 2 ministers. It goes on, but... So, fast forward 125 years, 2015, our congregation found itself in not a unique situation, dwindling membership, increasingly irrelevant to the surrounding neighborhood, trying to manage these old and difficult to keep up buildings and feeling heavily burdened. There are a few members of the congregation in this room who presided over this difficult period of discernment. And the congregation faced a number of options, including selling and merging with a neighboring, more suburban congregation, but also was trying, again, because of the efforts of several people in this room, to find another possible way forward. And so after a period of discernment and talking with a number of ministers and community activists and wise folk, the congregation decided to take a bold step and commit its resources to create the HUUB, HUUB, with the idea that if we saw our buildings as our greatest asset instead of an albatross around our necks, and opened the doors and invited the community in, that life would fill the buildings and the resources to take care of the buildings would follow. So we've been doing that work for 10 years. And last year, 2024, there were 368 gatherings in this building. Probably some 3,500 people, it's my estimate, holding their repasts, quinceañeras, sweet 16s, music video shoots, artist showcases, mayoral debates, labor organizer trainings. We even had the socialist candidate for president speak in our buildings last year. So in some sense, what was envisioned by the members of the congregation a decade ago has come true. We're also very proudly home to a number of other mission-aligned movement organizations, including the University of Orange, which is a People's Free School of offices in our building next door, Lambie Center for Civics and Humanities, which is a Haitian-run immigrant-serving organization, and the Laundry Workers Center, who organize with laundromat workers and construction workers in the tri-state area. So there's a lot going on, a lot of life, and the buildings are upright and looking better than they did 10 years ago. So we're proud to have found a path forward and a way to live up to the legacy of of the First Unitarian Universalist Church. So that's where you are, that's who we are. And on this auspicious occasion of our 135th year as a congregation in Orange and 10th year as the HUUB, we're very excited to have a series of guests that we're inviting to share as our Faith+. I should talk about the congregation a little bit as well. So we've invited a series of guests this year to the Faith+Works Unitarian Universalist congregation. We changed our name last year, understanding that the role of the congregation, because while we've been figuring out how to do the work of the HUUB, right, this question of what is the role of the congregation in this network. We're lay-led. We also happen to have a minister, in addition to being lay-led. So our Reverend Dr. Edgar Rivera Colon, who comes and talks with us twice a year, has helped us understand the congregation as a place for a collective spiritual discernment that anchors the work that happens here. And so since 2017, we've been hosting these monthly services, Faith+Works services, where we invite artists, organizers, scientists, civic leaders, faith leaders, whole array of people, community members, to come and talk about their faith and their work, and how the two, whatever those two words mean to them, and how the two inform and transform one another. And it's been amazing series of talks, and a very profound kind of learning about this topic. So this year, to celebrate our 135th and 10th, respectively, anniversary, we have a very exciting array of guests. Last month we had Reverend Dr. Om Prakash, who was in fact the minister that 10 years ago said, you all should see your buildings as an asset and open the doors and let people use them. Today we have some very special guests as well. I'm going to welcome Mindy to introduce them in just one second. But first I'm going to welcome Becky Doggett, one of our esteemed board members of the HUUB, up to give some opening words, and Molly Rose Kaufman to light the chalice. And then over to you after that, Mindy. Thank you.
So good afternoon, friends. This is going to be a wonderful program. These are two, as Mindy calls them, the wise women who are sharing their experiences with us today. Just a couple days ago, I celebrated a birthday. It was my 84th birthday.
Happy birthday, thank you.
And it brought to mind an important poem that started with us many years ago, especially through my dear friend Ernie Thompson, who's the father of Mindy Thompson Fully Loved. And it's called The Bridge Builder by Will Allen Drumgoole. And I said, gee, you know, I didn't really read up on who Will Allen is. And much to my surprise, a couple days ago, I discovered that Will Allen is a woman and a very prolific poet. So born in Tennessee. So it just added another dimension to the importance of this poem called The Bridge Builder. An old man going a lone highway came at the evening, cold and gray, to a chasm that was vast and deep and wide, through which was flowing a sullen tide. The old man crossed in the twilight dim. That sullen stream had no fears for him. But he turned when he reached the other side, and built a bridge to span the tide. "Old man," said a fellow pilgrim near, "you are wasting strength in building here. Your journey will end with the ending day. You never again must pass this way. You have crossed the chasm deep and wide. Why build you the bridge at eventide?" The builder lifted his old great head. "Good friend, in the path I have come," he said, "there followeth after me today a youth whose feet must pass this way. This chasm that has been naught to me, to that fair youth may a pitfall be. They too must cross in the twilight dim. Good friend, I'm building this bridge for them."
Hi, everybody. I'm Mindy Philippa, member of the congregation, and so excited to welcome you all here today for this special event. Imagine 135 years. It makes you feel very proud, right? And the HUUB has managed to keep going for 10 years. And those of us who were there voting, should we do this or not do this? We have a very ambivalent vote. We said, well, let's do it, but if in a year, if it doesn't work, let's undo it. Because, would you believe that we could actually do it for 10 years, keep the doors open, and paint and replace the roof, all these other good things. So, in honor of this great occasion, well, it is an honor for us. We are so thrilled to have Doctors Joanne Braxton and Rebecca Parker in alphabetical order. You couldn't say one is more important than the other, so you have to do so. Their full bios you can find at the Braxton Institute, which they are founders. The thing that I really want to say is that when the three wise men went to follow the star to the stable, they brought frankincense and myrrh. And so when the two wise women came to Orange, New Jersey, they bought sage, cedar, and lavender. So there you have it. And I turn it over to them.
Thank you, Mindy. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Molly. Dr. Braxton and I are so happy to be here with you, and we say congratulations on your 10 years in your new incarnation and 135 years of keeping the fire of progressive religion and its public witness alive here in Orange. Congratulations. We are going to begin with a meditation. This is a music meditation, and I'm going to teach it to you. And it's a very simple chant, the purpose of which is to be sung over and over again until you allow the music to deepen into your whole being, and until together we create a sonic environment that holds all of us. We're going to sing it at the beginning, the middle, and the end today, and each time we'll make it a little more complex. But first, just listen to the way the basic chant sound goes, like this. Sing it a cappella. Just sing after me. There is a love holding us. We'll make it plural. There is a love holding us. Listen. There is a love holding all we love. There is a love holding all we love. There is a love holding all. There is a love holding all. Okay, you've got it. We're going to just sing it over and over again. You can look at the music if it helps you, but sing without it if you can. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. Going there. Keep going. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm Joanne Braxton, one of the founders of the Braxton Institute for Sustainability, Resiliency, and Joy. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Molly, for the invitation to be present in shared sacred space with you today. Thank you to all who are present in this sanctuary. Thank you to Cousin Diane Ligon, Cousin Angela Wilson, Reverend Mr. Barb Grieve, and all our friends and colleagues and relatives who are joining us by Zoom. Something I only remembered as we were singing. Once, when I was in fear for my life, as I was being wheeled into surgery, Dr. Parker is telling me to speak up. As I was being wheeled into surgery, I knew it would be a 5.5-hour surgery. I knew I would be paralyzed for at least 3.5 of those hours intentionally. I did not know whether I would wake up. I sang "There Is a Love" as they wheeled me down the hall. I'm sharing this with you because there may come a time when having your song, if it is "There Is a Love," may be the thing that holds you together, even in a place of deep fear. So this is the first tool that we'll offer today. Since 2012, the Braxton Institute co-creates strategies to repair and heal harms and traumas of historically oppressed communities, to lift up legacies of resistance and joy. We do this with education, the arts, ritual, spiritual practices, in support of those who care for others, especially leaders with marginalized identities. We also foster community building across generations and advance research, teaching, public dialogue, and advocacy to cultivate sustainability, resiliency, and joy in dangerous times. For we need these things, especially in dangerous times. A good example of how we do this, in addition to local, regional, and national trainings and our dialogues on resisting and thriving, would be our signature small group circles of care. We'll come back to the circles of care momentarily. But who are we who are the repairers? Those of us who would seek to repair the breach. Most of us, many of us, come to the work from a place of our own injury, or from an awareness of having seen systemic harm and injury and been unable to prevent it. We are, in many cases, ourselves broken vessels in need of repair. Through the Institute, I continued my decades-long work to bring about repair for my hometown of Lakeland, Maryland, devastated by the broken promises of urban renewal in the 70s and 80s. Here's a piece of my story as I published it in Black World back in 1969. Sometimes I Think of Maryland by Jody Braxton. Big old houses have passed away like summer's dust. Green apples, poke salad, blue sky and Reverend Patty's sermon, the safety of Grandma's rocker, a lullaby from her knee, her sweet voice, her hands so clean and praying or scolding, she tends her mother's grave. Her father was a slave. Go to sleepy little baby. Go to sleepy little baby. When you wake, patty, patty cake, ride a big white pony. A brown flood breaks the banks down at the branch where I wrote my first poem. Flowers bloom in a vacant yard where there was once a house with a porch and 6 low steps with the carpet painted on. I place my head next to earth and listen deep for voices, recognition, memory, song. Close my hand over empty soil where once grew corn, collards, and tomatoes 2 pounds big. Close my eyes to see the patchwork quilt of time and impossibility that covers me like kente cloth. And I close my eyes to see no longer growing up, but older, a woman who bleeds with the moon and waits for a child to burden with this heritage. Over time, as I have become more known in the reparations movement, I've been called upon to offer my expertise as a spiritual caregiver. Last June, the work took me to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I served as chaplain to leaders in the national reparations movement. We visited one of the several mass grave sites from the 1921 massacre. A humbling experience. Following 1921, some of the Black citizens of Tulsa returned and began to rebuild with so much optimism. But in the 1970s, the interstate tore right through the heart of the Dreamland Theater and rebuilt Greenwood. For this reason, the locals refer to urban renewal and the building of the interstate as the second Greenwood massacre. And they painted on the side of the freeway a big mural that says Black Wall Street, so you know where it was. But back to the circles of care. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we created circles of care for Black clinicians and other change makers in high stakes situations. In these online circles of spiritual care, participants were able to share confidentially and securely, receive support from each other, and offered support to each other, and learn spiritual practices for their own sustainability. One participant, a young Black woman pediatrician, commented, "For the first time in my career, the compartmentalization of Black woman and doctor has been impossible to sustain." The Braxton Institute Circles of Care were offered at a time when I needed a safe container to process some difficult feelings. My longing for human connection in the midst of so much suffering has been mirrored by almost all around me. We were watching the world struggle with the dual pandemics of COVID-19 and the realities of systemic racism. And during the summer of 2020, I felt emotionally drained as I relived years of suppressed micro and macro aggressions. Going to work was hard. Being home was hard. It all felt hard. I was searching for healing and wondering if my current self-care toolkit would be enough to get me through this. In the circles, I found a sanctuary, a space where I didn't feel like a token and could be my authentic self. I could also offer support to others like me and feel held and supported in return. One wonderful surprise was finding myself in the company of other Black pediatricians, something I never take for granted. Being in community with kindred souls made me feel grounded at a time when I felt quite lost. How did our ancestors get through? They sang, they prayed, they loved one another, and we must do the same. And now, what we did for Black clinicians and change makers during COVID, in this season of moral panic, the Institute will do for leaders in the reparations movement through our Golden Repair Fellowships, made possible by a single generous donor. I am reminded of a quote from Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God, where Nanny says to her granddaughter, Janie, "Put me down easy, Janie. I'm a cracked plate." The good news is that repair is possible, especially in community. This we know from 13 years of teaching and healing grounded in deep listening and connection with others committed to ending cycles of violence and lifting up legacies of resistance and joy. May it be so.
myself. And all the while, I am being carried by great winds across the sky. Those are the words of an Ojibwe poet. When I was a little girl, the one thing I believed in was music. On Sundays, I would run home after church, and at the piano, I would play these notes. I was sure that that tune would actually bring peace to the world. Who's to say I was wrong? That peace hasn't broken out yet. Still, I do believe that music does have the power to hold us when we can't hold ourselves. And this is how I would define faith. Faith is the ability to rest in something larger than yourself that can hold you when you cannot hold yourself. That music of Bach that I just played feels to me like those great winds across the sky, holding all of us. Faith is what gives us resilience, spiritual grounding, and tenacity to stay in the struggle. And staying in the struggle is imperative now. The planet is getting warmer and warmer. The dangerous president is back in office. Black lives are increasingly terrorized. White supremacy is flexing its muscles with bravado, and techno-fascists have taken control of the US government. What can hold us when our hearts are breaking and the world is wearying us to death? Through my years of ministry and teaching and the work of the Braxton Institute, I have learned to pay attention to the many ways that when we are working to resist the things we know are causing tremendous harm and committed with all our might to changing the world for the better, at the very same time, we are carrying wounds from the very injustices and harms that we are trying to stop. Studies show that, for example, people who become helpers and healers, who go into the healing professions, ministers and activists, a high percentage of them, of us, have been impacted by trauma or moral injury, the trauma of war, the injury of sexual abuse, or cultural violence against our people or our communities that either harms us or that we are harmed by not being able to stop. We carry injury all the while we are trying to stop injury. And right now, the impacts of what is happening in our nation is happening within us. How are you sleeping at night? This is why our work at the Braxton Institute seeks to hold soul work and justice work together, inner care and outward activism. At one and the same time, we need tikkun olam, repair of the world, and we need tikkun nefesh, repair of our breathing selves that are winded, tattered and torn, struggling ourselves to breathe. Transformation of our own soul wounds into healing wisdom to help the world can be a lifelong process. But it starts with embracing the reality of our own need, our own vulnerability. The fact that we require spiritual grounding to be resilient. This is not easy for everyone. When I was called to be the president of Star King School for the Ministry, our Unitarian Universalist theological school in California, I went to see my friend Reverend Dr. Leon Hopper, a wise, compassionate, and seasoned Unitarian Universalist elder. I asked Leon, given that I am going to be educating people who want to become ministers, tell me, what do you know now after 40 years in the ministry that you wish you had known at the start? Leon said, I wish I had known how often liberal people of faith use their religion to deny their own experiences of pain. Think about that for a moment. Probably most of Dr. Hopper's experience was with white folks, to which this probably applies in particular, but not exclusively. Liberal religion celebrates our strengths, our human giftedness, our capacity. It calls us to action, and we respond. Unitarian Universalists, we say, punch above their weight in the public sphere. We do a lot, and that's all to the good. But it does have a downside. For whites in particular, liberal religion can construct an arrogant overconfidence, self-importance. It can inflate our capacity, our certitude that we know what is needed in every situation. And it can minimize our vulnerability. In the extreme, you might call this toxic whiteness. It involves a split consciousness, a flight to the light, as Jung called it, that celebrates the supremacy of power and control and denies or denigrates human need. Such a split can make people insensitive to human suffering, without empathy for the suffering they cause or the suffering they may be carrying, we may be carrying. I don't need to tell you where we see this kind of toxic whiteness at play right now. The progressive Christian blogger and queer activist, Reverend Brandon Robertson, since the inauguration and the prayer service, has been asking, why have Christian nationalists and the new president been cruelly attacking Bishop Buddy for imploring the incoming president to have mercy on the people who are scared now? And he answers this question by writing, quote, that he has discovered more and more conservatives are talking about empathy as a negative thing. Allie Beth Stuckey, a far-right commentator and Christian, released a book recently called Toxic Empathy: How Progressives Exploit Christian Compassion. She and a growing number of conservatives feel that the left poses a threat by appealing to people's compassion to guide their moral and political decisions, rather than appealing to what she claims is truth. Robertson points out that this leads to an authoritarian morality, in which the greatest virtue is obedience and loyalty to the chain of command from God to God's appointed representative on earth. A God who operates by reward and punishment, threat, a God of fiats. And in turn, this kind of morality demands the inner suppression of any feelings that would keep a person from being obedient to the chain of command. Hence, compassion is a threat that has to be denigrated and suppressed. This is what's really going on with Christian nationalism and the political impacts it's bringing to our common life. The cautionary tale here for all of us, whatever our identity, is that we must not fall into spiritual frameworks that split us off from the capacity for empathy, to feel pain, others, or our own. We must not split ourselves into an internal pattern of dominance and submission, lording it over aspects of ourselves that we despise, or silencing experiences we don't know how to integrate, suppressing weakness or need. Otherwise, we may find ourselves resisting authoritarianism in the world while employing it within ourselves. We must attend to the inner care of our souls. We must cultivate resilience through faith that can hold the fullness of who we are, capable and vulnerable, strong and broken. If we don't do this, our desire to offer help or healing or keep up the good work may falter. We may get sick. We may become overwhelmed with despair. There is a new outrage every day. And we can't afford to not find ways to retain our resilience when the assaults don't stop and the injustices keep coming. And the work we did 40 years ago has to be done again now. This is when we need faith, spiritual grounding in something larger than ourselves that can hold us, all of us, when we cannot hold ourselves. So here's my story. I have not always had faith, but I have come to have some faith through struggle with buried trauma. And my faith is captured in the simple meditation we started with today. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all I love. There is a love holding all. I rest, we rest in this love. So let me tell you how this affirming faith and the resiliency it helps me have came into being. When I was a small child, a neighbor took advantage of my trust. My kind and good parents could never have imagined such a thing as sexual abuse of children. I hid it from them. I buried the hurt and the shame in silence, and I became all sunshine. There was no such thing as night and terror. I denied it. And I excelled at school, at college, at graduate school, and I became an ordained United Methodist minister. And I was good at ministry, compelled to be a helper, to give hope and meaning and comfort to others, to work for justice. But all the while, inside my own heart, the deep chasm of night was growing bigger and bigger and heavier. And I managed this interior threat by working all the time. So there could never be a gap where terror might creep through. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we try to overachieve. But a turning point came. Exhausted and depleted after about 5 years in the ministry, I went on a silent retreat. And in the stillness, this clear awareness came to me. The center of my life is fear. Fear was generating my outward success. Fear was driving my relentless work and even my commitment to the ministry. So with the help of a spiritually grounded and gifted therapist, I began a long process of facing the injury I carried, and I found a pathway through it to a repaired heart that was grounded in something other than fear, that had the resilience and strength needed to hold both night and day, deep pain and exuberant joy, vulnerability and capability. The journey was not easy. I don't even want to tell you how long it took, but it involved ending denial and moving out of my self-imposed isolation. It involved telling the truth about what had happened to me, to people who loved me, my family, my brothers, and my closest friends, and it required reliving the nightmare with support, going back to remember it until a breakthrough came. It came as a memory that returned to me, that in the very moment when I was that small child and the abuser was hurting me, there was another presence, unseen, but profoundly real. The presence of an all-encompassing compassion, an all-seeing, all-knowing, inclusive embrace, an unbreakable love. And I felt that it was greater than me and greater than the abuser. It encompassed him and me. And at the same time, I felt it stood between him and me, saying, no, stop to the abuser, and protecting me. I believe that presence saved my life. In the days and weeks that followed, I distilled that spiritual awakening into a simple prayer. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all I love. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. This prayer means that not only am I within that love, and my beloveds within it, but even those that I cannot love, those that may be causing me and those things that I love harm, even those that Jesus might call the enemies, are held within that larger embrace. This is the core of universalism, the all-embracing love. So today, this is the simple prayer we are offering to you. I have taught it to many ministerial students. I've said it to the simple chant we sang, and we're going to sing it again in a moment. You are welcome to use this prayer if you would like, if it's meaningful for you. The one purpose of spiritual practice is to connect ourselves to that ground of all being, that foundation of a benevolence, a love, a mystery that holds us all and wishes the well-being of all of us, all creatures. My faith is that this love never lets us go, but we can lose track of it. Human cruelty can estrange us from it. We can dwell in fear and anger. We can be lost in despair and confusion. We can be cut off from others and isolated in all-consuming self-repair, self-concern, even all-consuming self-repair, possibly. And we can be so hurt that we close down from feeling or receiving or knowing that we are loved and that life is good. So we need practices that bring us back again and again to this love. And when I say this prayer, I call the names of my beloveds and I place them within that love. Joanne in this love. Doug in this love. Molly in this love. You in this love. When I meet you and you meet me, we do not meet in a void. We meet within this all-inclusive reality. It wills our good and supports the possibility that we can do right by one another. But when harm has happened or is happening, this presence does say no. It holds abusers to account. It calls us and empowers us with the resilience we need to resist injustice, repair injury, and return again to love. It is new every morning, an ever-springing fountain that refreshes over and over again the possibilities of life to flourish, to heal, and to go on towards fullness of joy. We might only feel it in moments. Faith tends to blink on and off like a half-burned out light bulb. But even when dim, with practice, we can come to trust it is there. So I invite us to sing again, There Is a Love. And this time, we'll make it a little more complex if we can. Do we have time to continue a little longer? So this is just the only other time we'll sing. But if you know how a round works, you can start after the first phrase. After some people start singing There Is a Love, then you can start, and then somebody else can start, and pretty soon we can layer all the harmonies of There Is a Love. And I want to thank Daryl for being here to help us with that. In other words, just go for it.
Dr. Parker.
You're welcome, Dr. Braxton.
Spiritual practices of resistance. In her novel of the same name, Alice Walker wrote that resistance is key to possessing the secret of joy. In the Book of Joy, Archbishop Desmond Tutu and His Holiness the Dalai Lama wrote that joy is the key to developing psychological immunity to harm. Deep joy, not just happiness, but that thing that lies beneath the happiness. Developing psychological immunity to harm has a purpose in order to maintain equilibrium so that we are prepared to resist. Tutu and His Holiness recommend a regimen of prayer and meditation, among other things, to strengthen one's spiritual grounding. In moments of adversity, one of the things we who occupy the present historical moment can do is to use ritual and the arts to call on the love that undergirds us all. And sometimes when I think of my Father in heaven, I think of my daddy. Just a second. Too many pieces of paper. Daddy, for all flesh is as grass, and all glory as the flower of grass. The grass withereth, and the flower thereof falleth away. 1 Peter. The wild, wild rose, around my father's grave it grows. It burrows early, dark and deep, to keep the secrets of his sleep, to keep the secrets of his sleep. In my mind, Daddy, I will always be your little girl, your sweet thing. In my mind, Daddy, I am 2 years old, and you are a young father graduating from machinist school at the Navy Yard. You are so dapper, Mama Beans. Every hair on my head is in place. A notable achievement. I fidget as is my way, and lose the pretty ribbon Mama has put in my hair. I cry. You take the ribbon from around your diploma and tie it in my hair, Daddy. On the day of your funeral, I ask you to hold my hand. I know I cannot make it without you, for I am always a little girl when it comes to you. There you lie so thin and gaunt and waxen, yet still handsome in your pinstripe suit and the Yale tie I gave you when I finished graduate school. I tell the undertaker to remove a piece of lint from your eyelash. My father was very particular, I tell the man, a distant cousin. I can see that, he says in return. Somehow, he knows we are fruit of the same root. But you are not in that box. You are somewhere beside me, holding my hand. So many photographs of you in my mind, you and Uncle Ford, your best army buddy, and my godfather at the dining room table on Christmas morning, competing to see who can put away the most oysters with the greatest relish over Grandma's country ham, cooked to perfection, over Grandma's billowy white rolls. Then come the stories about the Red Ball Express, about Italy and Europe, and Hitler's death camps. How you commandeered those common German citizens to clean up Buchenwald. You saw those indelicate artifacts firsthand. You remembered the awful seasickness and the beaches of Normandy. More than 25 years later, I will go to Westminster Abbey and stand on Neville Chamberlain's head because you did that during the war. I duck under the satin cord, and I think, this is for you, Daddy. I mail a postcard to confirm the completion of my assignment. I am your daughter, Daddy. I am your daughter, born for good luck. Harry spit, just like my father for the world. Doesn't everybody say so, Daddy? As long as I live, you will never die. Doesn't everybody say so, Daddy? The rose, the rose, the wild, wild rose, around my father's grave it grows. It burrows early, dark and deep, to keep the secrets of his sleep.
prepared to share with you today. And do you have somebody have some closing words?
Yeah, thank you. Another round for our guests. Thank you. We have some, excuse me, people on Zoom. Thanks for joining us. We'll have some refreshments in the parish hall where you'll be able to talk and ask some questions of Joanne and Rebecca. But also anyone else that's here. I'd like to point out Marcial, who directs Lambi in the back, is here, and Molly Rose Kaufman of the University of Orange, two of our tenants here, so feel free to connect with them. And tomorrow, February 10th at 6 p.m. is our monthly Solidarity Potluck. It's a chance to gather and feed each other. Less directly than that might, people bring food and eat food, but we nourish each other. We will have some music by an artist friend of ours who's going to sing for us, and fun art activities. We'll make some Valentine's cards. What else am I forgetting that we should announce? Cousins. You want to talk about cousins a little bit?
Yeah, so our colleague and mentor and co-director of Music City program, Dr. Margot Simmons, who's on Zoom right now, hi Margot, has been stressing to us that importance of really owning in our hearts the way that we're all interrelated and interconnected, even to those we can't love. So Mindy and Margot created a call for an art show with the theme of cousins. That is an exploration of that notion that we're all cousins. And so the art show will be next door in the Hale House, and the opening is next Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Some of our artists are here today, including Bethany. So there's maybe about like 18 artists and pieces in the show, and it's really cool. So be here next Saturday. And thank you to our beloved Margot.
And then lastly, the next Faith+Works is on March 9th, where Minister Edgar Rivera Colon will give his second talk of the year, here and online. We're going to end with a
I have a
meditation.
blessing. No, well,
Oh, bless. Please.
bravo for your good singing. Now you know it, you can do it. No, we just wanted to send you out with the word of blessing, and these are words from the Hebrew scriptures spoken to the people who had been oppressed and exiled, and it's a promise. You shall go out with joy and be led forth in peace. The mountains and the hills shall break before you into singing, and the trees of the field shall clap their hands for joy. So let us go forth in strength and solidarity.
Also, round of applause for Bill, please.